This is Dr. Tina Mims. We're going to talk about the Texas Bearing Company. This is a challenge to be able to test our ability to do markup and markdown equations, and also to test our ability to determine break-even points with and without a profit goal. So the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to read the instructions, and as we get a chance to, we're going to put in some of the information that we have here. For example, we know the retail price is $32. We can see that in our explanation. We're going to take a little bit and read on. TBC estimates labor and materials to be $9.48. So I'm going to put in $9.48 under our variable costs. Then we have sales representative commission, which is 5% commission for every bearing sold. I'm going to come back to that. I'm actually going to put in the production setup, which it says $13,650 is required to set up the production run, regardless of the number of bearings produced. Let's make sure we have all of our cells for dollars where appropriate, and make sure we have cents. Okay, let's read on. We're going to put in the individual salesperson's salary, which is $36,000. Now that's for each salesperson. Make that a dollar sign again. And I'm going to make myself a note right here, number of salespeople, because that's the salesperson's salary per person, and we have 2 salespeople. We're going to need to know that. Okay, so we've got production setup, salesperson salary. Now we need to add the travel support that's given to us of $9,000. Again, this is per salesperson. Then some of the other details we have here is the cost of advertising and sales promotion. But let me go back and add that 5% sales commission in. Now that 5% is on each of Texas Bearing Company's sales. So every time the sales rep makes a sale, it's 5% commission to them. And the average retail percent markup on sales price is 0.4, which is 40%. Wholesale distributor markup on cost, that's a percent markup on cost, because we got to be sure and read this right, remember, because it said 40% markup based on purchase price, which is actually the retailer's sales price, right? So that now we've got wholesaler distributor markup on cost. It says is typically 33% on TBC's selling price, which of course, anytime the manufacturer sells something to the wholesaler, it's the wholesaler's cost. Okay, so let's see what else. Expected contribution margin. We need to have a profit goal of $37,000. We're going to put in here under a separate area. Make sure it says dollar signs. Now let me see if I've missed anything else. I'm reading through the... Oh yeah, let's put the number of salespeople. Let's put that down under an other section. So I'm going to cut that out here. And I'm going to move it down here to an information on number of salespeople. So that way we have in our input section our information on prices and margins, variable costs, fixed costs, profit goals, and just generally some other information. Okay, so that gets us down to working on our first question, which is, what is the selling price of a bearing at each stage of the channel. That is the selling price of the retailer. Remember, it says selling price of the retailer, selling price of the wholesaler, selling price of the manufacturer. So let's see if we can't go about this and handle it with the information we've got. We know that the average retailer percent markup on selling price is 40%. I'm going to just make these a couple of extra percentages, give us a couple more decimals. And we know that that's a number. We only have 2 whole people. We don't have any part-time people. Otherwise, we could put 2.25 or 2.50. But we have 2 field sales reps. And I'm going to save my work right now. I'm just going to save it on the desktop. That's a lot of input that we just did. So take a moment, save your work right now so we can find it and keep working on it. I'm putting on here the solution. Okay, I feel better now. All right, so what is the selling price of a bearing at each stage in the channel? That is, selling price of the retailer, the wholesaler, the manufacturer. I'm going to split my file. I'm going to show you to do that. You're just going to highlight a row, go up here to View, go over here to Split, and now this gives me the ability to scroll up and down on one half of the screen, and then I can move this up and down. I can scroll up and down on the bottom half of the split screen, which is really kind of cool. It's like picture in a picture kind of, you know, except we have control of it. This is very helpful. That way I can move my inputs, my output section up while I'm working and using the input information. All right, so we're going to start working on question 1. We need to determine the retailer's selling price for each bearing. Well, that's going to be equal to B9 because that was given to us, right? Yeah, it was given to us in the program. Okay, so now what's the retailer's cost though? See, we have to use the average retailer percent markup on sales price, and we need to use that formula sheet, figure out which formula. Okay, so we're going to have to look for the formulas that tell us we're trying to determine the cost, and we have the markup on sales price, which is actually taking the sales price we have, just going to make that a $sign again, and we're looking here at percent markup based upon selling price, and we have actually determined, we're trying to figure out what the cost is, so that is selling price times 1 minus the percent markup on selling price. So we're actually using formula 1. So I want you to stop this, take a look at it, and absorb what we're doing. Okay? Because remember, the question is, what is the selling price at each level of the channel? So to do that, we're going to have to go back and forth. What's the sales price here? What's the cost here? What's the sales price here? What's the cost here? But we used F1 to determine the retailer's cost. Now, good news is that tells us exactly what the wholesaler selling price is, right? Because whenever the wholesaler sells to the retailer, that became the retailer's cost. So remember the handoff we talked about in class. You know, we got to picture the ball handing off from one entity to the next in the chain. But now we need to find out what is the wholesaler's cost, okay? And, okay, we're trying to determine the wholesaler's cost, and we have percent markup on cost. So when we have percent markup based on cost, you can see here we've got to use either formula 3 or formula 4. And so it looks like we need formula 4 because we're trying to determine the cost. We have percent markup on cost. We have to use the selling price that we know the wholesaler sold at and divide it by 1 plus the percent markup on cost. Okay, so we'll go up here and we'll format that in a dollar sign, and it'll automatically round it up to whole cents, which is fine. And clearly, if the wholesaler cost is $14.44 per unit, we know what Texas Bearing is charging, which is selling at $14.44. So we've answered question 1. Okay, so that's great. We gave the selling price at each level of the channel. Okay, so let's look at Q2. Q2 says, calculate if necessary, then itemize the unit variable cost. Okay, so we got to figure out what are all of our variable costs here. Well, the first thing we know is we have labor and material cost per bearing. So let's just go capture that because it does say itemize. So I need to list this again under question 2. And the sales representative commission per bearing, remember we wrote that in because the story told us that it was 5% on every sale, right? So that's equal to the commission, 5%, times what is Texas Bearing selling it for, which would be in B40, or 1444. So that's 72 cents. And that looks like that's all of our variable costs that we had listed in our information. So now all we have to do is total that up. And we can add these two cells together, cells, or we could also take and use the sum function that's under our home button. See up there at the top left? I'm going to hit home, scroll over here to the sum button, hit that. It only takes the contiguous, that means adjacent cells, and adds it up. So either way is fine, as long as you get to total. So that's $10.20, and we have finished with question 3. So now let's go down, make myself a little room here. We got to go to question 3. When we finish with question 2, we're going to go to question. It says calculate Texas Bearings dollar contribution and percent contribution per bearing. Piece of cake. We know the sales price per bearing by Texas Bearing, which is $14.44, and we're going to subtract the total variable cost, which is $4.23. Now to get the percentage, we're going to take that $4.23 and simply divide it by Texas Bearing's selling price, which turns out to be, a little less than 30%. So we're going to make our percent sign, and we're going to take it out a couple of decimal points because we need to be pretty precise here. Okay, that was piece of cake on question 3. Question 4, itemize, which means we've got to list everything, then total all the direct fixed costs, first time without the profit goal. Okay, great. Okay, so let's make sure we have all of our fixed costs from the story included. Just looking here. $36,000 for each salesperson, $9,000 for travel. Oh, I overlooked cost of advertising and sales promotion. See, that's so easy because it broke on that line. TBC's advertising, sales promotion, effort $6,000. So now I've got everything listed. Okay, so let's run through these. I'm just going to refer to each line. Now here's the deal. Salesforce salary is times 2 people, isn't it? So that's why it's important to go up there and get those other information, have 2 people there. So now $72,000. Now we got to do the same thing again with Salesforce travel. It's $9,000 per salesperson times the number of salespeople. So we're looking at $18,000. Then we've got that advertising and promotion, which is $6,000. I think I'm going to use the sum button this time and just total that up. We've got $109,650 in total direct fixed costs without a profit objective. Okay, so that takes care of question 4. Piece of cake. Itemize, then total. It's a great way to double check that you've gotten all the information in there when you have to answer these questions. Okay, let's go to question 5. So now what is Texas Bearing's number of units for break-even and dollar revenue for break-even without that profit goal? Well, that means we're going to take the total fixed costs that we determined, and we're going to round that up. So let's start off with the roundup function. That's a parentheses open. We're going to tell it where total direct fixed costs are, and then we're going to divide by the $C per unit. Oh, you see the error I made? Easy to make. I forgot to put a comma in and then tell it 0 decimals. That's how you round it up, okay? So we can't sell part of a bearing. So now we can get rid of those decimals because we have whole bearings that we're selling. And then clearly all we have to do here is take the number of units at break even and multiply it times the sales price. And Texas Bearing is selling those for $14.44 each. So we just multiply those. We need to make that a dollar sign because this is revenue. And there we go. $373, $836, and 99 cents is our break-even revenue. That means we're making no money. We're just covering our variable costs. Total direct fixed costs with profit objective. Okay, well, this is really kind of easy. There's a couple of ways you could write this. We're actually going to take the total direct fixed costs and we're going to add in that $37,000 profit objective. And we're going to answer question 6. That was so simple. Okay, so what is direct fixed cost with profit objectives? So now we can treat that sort of as our new total fixed number that we have to recover. So that means in question 7, we're going to start with this new total fixed cost with the profit. We're going to do our roundup, parentheses open, tell it where that is, divide it by $C, which is still the same number. We're going to put a comma this time after that location and put a 0 so we don't have any decimals, and it's rounded up to 34,634 units. I'm going to put a comma there and get rid of my decimals. Okay. And finally, to determine what is the revised revenue level of sales, that's what RLS means, revised revenue level. Well, clearly the number of units with the profit objective now included times $14.44 gives us a new break-even revenue level of sales to include all direct costs as well as our profit objectives, $499,900.